gosh, that timing of that music was beautiful. Good morning, everyone. I'm Dana Kuhnlein. All right, the AI is taking over here. Good morning, everyone. I'm Dana Kuhnlein. I am the campaign director for Reimagine Appalachia. I'm joining you from frigid cold Cincinnati, and I assume most of the rest of us are joining us from other frigid cold areas of our region. Please share what cold place you're joining us from this morning in the chat. We welcome your introductions. We have this set up as a meeting, not a webinar, because we do want to see your faces and hear from all of you. So you are welcome to interact in the chat, though please stay on mute so I don't have to manually mute you. Only our speakers are allowed to talk in the first hour. In the second hour, it will be your turn as we move into breakout rooms. I'm going to give us a little bit of an overview. It's wonderful to see all those folks introducing themselves in the chat. Feel free to share what temperature it is or how many inches of snow it is where you live. So I want to say I'm so excited. I am so proud of the agenda we've pulled together. I'm thankful to the literally dozens of people across the region who helped us vet and choose speakers and input on the agenda for this two-day summit. And for the speakers, facilitators, note takers, the logistical team, especially Molly Updegrove and Annie Regan, and all the other people it takes to make an event like this happen. This is our 4th annual Reimagine Appalachia January Strategy Summit. And as Amanda is going to highlight in just a minute, this isn't just an opportunity for us to learn from you all and share our own learnings and hear from folks who are doing amazing work in the region. It is also our chance as a regional coalition to get framework to shape our work for the year. So we'll be taking careful notes and thinking about that. Just a quick note on the couple tech notes. We do have a Facebook live stream. If you want to share that, the links to share that will appear in the chat. And also keep an eye to the chat for polls, surveys, and ways to attend more events. We have a busy January, February, and March, and those events are up on our website if you're interested in spending more time with us or helping us shape those events. We're always open to those kinds of conversations. We're also going to be sharing links to a couple blogs that have been posted recently. We have a very active blog. We're always interested in highlighting your work if you would like to participate. A few notes just to get us off the ground here. So yesterday, our country observed the holiday celebrating Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s life and his legacy to bring justice and equality to Black Americans. The story of Dr. King's life and work is an inspiring and humbling one to begin our summit on the day after. I wanted to quote a letter from a Birmingham jail, which I think should be required reading. I can't make you all read it, but I highly recommend reflecting over Dr. King's concise, clear vision that he had. It's easy to feel muddled in the day-to-day hustle and bustle of all of the things that can come into our work. And I do find reflecting on Dr. King's wisdom to be a great way to find clarity. But in that, he said, I am cognizant of the interrelatedness of all communities and states. I cannot sit idly by in Atlanta and not be concerned about what happens in Birmingham. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. Never again can we afford to live with the narrow provincial outside agitator idea. Anyone who lives inside the United States can never be considered an outsider. So as we look to what increasingly, if you look at the weather patterns that created the freeze that we're all going through today, even I think we have to look beyond United States and even look globally. We're all connected together at a pivotal moment in the history of our planet and climate action, as well as with new tools that we have through federal investments to create solutions to this global moment we find ourselves in. Obviously, we will focus on Appalachia in this, but I did want to highlight our interconnectedness and the interconnectedness of our issues. Reimagine often talks about resting on a three-legged stool. The legs being economic justice, environmental justice, and racial justice. How can we find solutions that rest on all three of those legs so that the new investments we're making don't risk toppling over and falling? So I'm so excited to hear from some of the speakers today, looking at how we can look at reinvigorating manufacturing in our region with that lens towards finding the win-win that works for as many people as possible. So with that, I am going to hand it over to Amanda Woodrum for a few words and a little poll to get us started into the meat of our agenda to get today. And again, if you haven't had a chance to introduce yourself in the chat, we would love to hear where you're joining us from. So Amanda.
All right. Thanks, Dana. So hopefully you all know this, but we're here today to talk about growing clean and efficient manufacturing in the Ohio River Valley region of Appalachia. This is both about, what it looks like, how do we envision it, but also how we get from where we are to where we need to go. What are the action steps? As we do with all our strategy summits, we will start with a keynote panel of experts and folks in the field to give us their thoughts and ideas related to those questions. And that panel is really meant to just jumpstart our conversation today. It will be actually followed by 4 breakout sessions where you will then be asked to share your own thoughts and ideas in a facilitated discussion. Essentially, think of these as mini roundtables, mini virtual roundtables. You will be able to choose between make what in Appalachia, building out a circular manufacturing ecosystem, redeveloping shuttered coal plants into eco-industrial parks or climate-friendly, sustainable manufacturing hubs. And then lastly, but not leastly, ensuring diversity and inclusion in the future of manufacturing in the region. So we strongly encourage you to attend, to stay and attend those breakout sessions and contribute your thoughts and ideas, even if it's just to emphasize something you heard in the panel. Because at the end of the day, our goal really is to develop a basic framework for an Appalachian manufacturing action plan. So we will have note takers and all the breakout sessions to capture your thoughts. Those notes will then be transformed into a draft manufacturing action plan. It'll be in a Google Doc, and that Google Doc will be circulated widely for additional feedback. And for those of you that are still here at the end, we will have a closing session where people can take a moment to emphasize something they heard today or that they're working on that they think should definitely be included in that Appalachian Manufacturing Action Plan. And that session will be co-facilitated by myself and Lou Tierno from the soon-to-be-launched Appalachian Sustainable Business Network. All right, so to help get us our motors in gear, I'm going to ask Molly if you can put up the Mentimeter. So before we kick off the panel, we're going to ask you to throw out some ideas for a word cloud. And Molly, I think, will be dropping the link, or maybe it's Annie, into the chat so you can add your 2 cents in what are your hopes for the future of manufacturing in Appalachia. We put a few out there just for examples. We want it to be energy efficient, we want it to be circular, we want it to be clean, diverse, union jobs. You put in your 2 cents. My dream is that this will be so cool that we will then have a graphic for our Appalachian Manufacturing Action Plan when we go to publish it. So please put in your 2 cents. Cool. Clean, sustainable, circular, very popular. Regenerative, that's interesting. Ooh, that's growing too. Equitable. Circular is very popular. Meaningful. Interesting. Not sure what that means.
So if you could make sure you're answering in the link at the Mentimeter, or we can type for those who are
Oh,
getting their
yeah.
ideas in the chat, go ahead and we can
Maybe drop the link
type.
again.
Yes, and I'll type them in for you. So that people don't have to click the link. I'll put them in there for you. All right, this is looking beautiful.
All right. Family sustaining wages, I see in there. Meaningful, again, growing. Somebody will have to explain that. Hopefully during the panel, someone will have an idea what that means. Local, yes, make it in Appalachia. I'm super excited about that. We'll be digging into ideas like make it in Appalachia, buy Appalachia. How do we promote that? Can we use local government procurement policies to drive made in Appalachia, buy Appalachia? You tell me, Dana, when we're ready.
We're
This
ready.
is looking
We're
pretty
ready.
good. All right.
If you want to enter the panel.
Definitely some clear win. Oh, I see union in there. Exciting. All right. So now I am going to turn things over to the co-moderators of our keynote panel. They are both co-directors of the Urban Manufacturing Alliance, which, like us, is also a diverse network of manufacturing support groups, community-based organizations, workers, educational institutes, and the public sector. They are dedicated to transforming manufacturing ecosystems into drivers of just and equitable development that puts communities first. Love that. Tanu Kumar leads the Industry and Inclusion Initiative at the Urban Manufacturing Alliance and works to build ecosystems that increase racial equity in manufacturing. And then we have Andrew Dahlgren. He leads the Local Branding Initiative, developing strategies for building entrepreneurial and industrial ecosystems that also employ best practices in circular manufacturing. Both will be staying to help assist during the breakout sessions, and they're eager to continue to help us in our effort to transform Appalachia into a manufacturing hub for sustainable industries that employ energy efficient and circular manufacturing practices, ensuring creation of good quality jobs and building a future workforce. It is diverse in inclusion. All right, over to you guys.
Awesome. Thank you, Amanda. Hi, everybody. I'm joining you from a slightly snowy Glenstad, Pennsylvania, which is just outside Philadelphia. I've been looking forward to this event for a couple months now, so I'm happy to be here and looking forward to today's conversation. Thank you, Amanda, for that awesome intro. So just to connect a few dots, as Amanda mentioned, I'm one of the co-directors of Urban Manufacturing Alliance. And while that means I work on how our organization as a nonprofit grows and scales and does what it does in the big picture, day to day, my work is much more about our PLACE program work, which means I focus a lot on building ecosystems and networks, bringing a lot of different stakeholders together. And all our work, it's all about helping scale up making manufacturing in different regions across the country. And so we do that work in a lot of different ways, but the kind of core of our work is really about bringing together different education leaders, different nonprofits, different manufacturing businesses themselves, different individuals, really kind of anybody and everyone that has a stake in seeing manufacturing scale and be successful. So just a kind of quick intro to Urban Manufacturing Alliance. We don't want to take up too much space right now. We are a national nonprofit, and as I mentioned, we work to transform and reshape manufacturing ecosystems. We've been doing this work for going on 7 years now. We work all across the country. While historically a lot of our work has been in larger cities, our big focus in the next couple of years really is getting more and more involved in regional initiatives like Reimagine Appalachia, but also in smaller towns across the country, because we realize there's so much work to be done to help kind of lift up and make manufacturing more accessible and more sustainable. And one last note before I pass it over to Tanu to introduce herself, I just wanted to share how excited I am to be part of this conversation. I learned about Reimagine Appalachia over last summer and then found out about the summit. And so it was an exciting opportunity to be part of the discussion. And one of the reasons I'm really excited is because everybody we've met in the kind of preparation for the summit is doing really amazing, awesome work. And so looking at the participants, we have over 200. So just imagining all the sort of energy and excitement and sort of passion and motivation that's in the room and part of the conversation today is just really kind of amazing, and really the kind of core of what urban manufacturing is about, is kind of finding ways to get everybody with all their different interests and motivations and shared cultures to find those ways of working together. So with that, I'll pass it over to Tanu, who will introduce herself.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here with you today. I'm zooming in from snowy upstate New York, in the Hudson Valley region near Albany. And I just want to reiterate what Andrew said. We're so excited to be invited to facilitate this conversation, and thank you for the Reimagine Appalachia team for hosting this event, and thank you all for taking out time out of your day to join us. So I am a co-director at the Urban Manufacturing Alliance, along with Andrew, and I lead our inclusive workforce pillar. And our key initiative is called Industry and Inclusion, and we'll be talking about that a little bit later in a breakout session as well. So we're thrilled to facilitate this conversation. Today, we're going to be able to hear from 4 leaders in this region that are advancing programs and strategies to ensure that manufacturing in Appalachia is more climate friendly, more equitable, and accessible to workers from diverse backgrounds, and rooted in a shared vision for the region. So they will be sharing examples and strategies of how to do this from their work, focusing on how to center communities, how to leverage regional assets, and really build a collaborative ecosystem. So we're really excited to hear from them. So without further ado, I just like to go ahead and introduce our panelists, and then I'm going to invite them each to share their perspectives and work on these issues for a few minutes. And after we hear from them, Andrew and I will moderate a short roundtable discussion before we move on to the next session, the breakout sessions. So our 4 panelists today are Tom Reed, who's a project manager at Catalyst Connection, Jacob Hanna, the CEO of Coalfield Development Corporation, Jen Gilburg, who is a Deputy Secretary of the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development's Office of Technology and Entrepreneurship, and then Jen Seifert, the Executive Director of New Leaf Justice Enterprises and Survivor Advocacy Outreach Program. So, Thomas, I'm going to turn it over to you to kick us off.
Sounds great. Thank you very much, Andrew and Tanu. I appreciate the introduction. So I'm going to just briefly talk a little bit about a program that we are launching, that we've just launched a couple of months ago. But just first, as I was introduced, my name is Tom Reed. I work for Catalyst Connection. Catalyst Connection is a economic development organization based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and we support small and medium-sized manufacturers in southwestern Pennsylvania. We are part of a nationwide manufacturing extension partnership, and so there are MEP centers like ours all across the country. But today, what I want to talk about is how Catalyst Connection has gathered together with about 9 of our other MEP centers across Appalachia and Reimagine Appalachia, and we applied for a grant through the Appalachian Regional Commission to help us to, reach out and work with manufacturers in the clean energy manufacturing sector. So, as all of you probably can think back, Catalyst Connection has been around for more than 30 years. We've been helping manufacturers in the region. And so a lot of our clients have worked over the years. Historically, they have worked in the coal energy supply chains, providing, some aspect or piece to that. And so, over the last decade or so, we've been looking around and saying there are all of these clean energy supply chains that are out there. How can we help our manufacturers, as the coal industry is going through changes and declines? How can we tap into these emerging clean energy sources, help companies not only to sell into those industries and make products for those industries, but also to adopt some of that clean energy lifestyle? So that's what I'm going to share with you today. And so let me just pull up. So the Clean Energy Manufacturing in Appalachia is a program that we began, and it covers a five-state region, and we did receive an Appalachian Regional Commission ARISE grant that would help us to get some funding to support our project ideas. And so it's a 4-year program. We received $10 million in grant funding, and there will be $7.25 million in matching funds that will come either from the partner organizations or from the manufacturing businesses themselves to move these things forward. So there are 156 counties. I'll show you a map in just a minute across the 5 states. And they're all contiguous, so it makes it easy for us to have events and to be able to move back and forth as a single unit, even though there are state lines in between. And so you can see here, the program is going to help manufacturers to implement green manufacturing and approaches, retool their factories, get more engaged, build skilled workforce. So there are several ways that we're going to do that, and we have, begun. Let's see. So the geographic region there again is the map. You can see in these 156 counties, there are over 10,000 manufacturing businesses, and they employ 425,000 workers in these sectors. So this is significant, a significant impact on the economy, the region going forward. And so as the ARC identifies those counties, they have pulled out that 24 of those counties are considered distressed, 34 at risk, 93 transitional, and 5 are competitive. So you can see there are, these employers are significant and important to these regions, and maybe the difference between, poverty and thriving for many families. So how the program breaks down is we kind of have, I always let everyone know that we have 2 buckets where we put our efforts. So one is greener factory strategies. So the idea is we know that manufacturers use a lot of energy. So how can we help those companies to reduce, be more efficient with their energy? What are some practices they can do? So here are 3 main areas that we look to assist with. Awareness, baselines, and goals. So we have a self-assessment out there. We're developing a greener factory toolkit to just really help people go on the journey of, what are we talking about with energy? How should we look at that? There are energy assessments and audits that are much more in depth. And so there are other organizations that we can point companies to, like the Industrial Assessment Centers, the Department of Energy, PennTap in Pennsylvania, to really help go in and do an all-day assessment, attach equipment, and really help them to figure out what is their current usage and where are the areas where they have the best chance to make big improvements, not only to reduce their carbon footprint, but also to save themselves a lot of money. And then the third would be compliance and regulation. I think we're all familiar with some of these terms: ESG, regulatory, then customer requirements. And they're starting to, use tools like EcoVadis, Arcadia, CDP to do measurements. So we're helping, companies are very confused by where to get started. What does all this mean? And so a lot of our goals is education and engagement. Under our clean energy supply chain, then again, so we have, as I mentioned, we have companies that are still supporting coal or other supply chains. And so we're saying, hey, look at these opportunities, help to plan, figure out maybe products that you make today. How can those be either marketed to the clean energy supply chains, or maybe small alterations made, or maybe even to develop a whole new product within your capability level to go out and reach into those new markets. And so then again, the third one there I say is, helping to develop new products, modifying existing products to help companies to get out there and make those connections. So just some of the program resources, and I think that we're going to share in chat, maybe we already have. I would just encourage you to go to wemakeithere.org/clean-energy. You can see some of the tools that we have developed ourselves and our partners are out there promoting, but then we also point to a lot of these other resources and information. We have a mini grant that we offer. It's up to $10,000. It's a matching mini grant, and it's to help with things like if a company is looking to, I'll give you an example. We had a company who makes springs and those kind of pieces, and they wanted to get more into the efficient garage door markets, you know, those high efficiency garage doors, but they didn't have a machine to make the springs that would align perfectly with this. We couldn't offer the mini grant to pay for the new machinery, but we were able to help them with some of the electrical modifications that they need to do to their facility to be able to operate this new equipment. And then we just tap into, there are literally millions and hundreds of millions of dollars in grants and tax incentives out there that can help pay for that kind of equipment and facility upgrades and those sorts of things. But manufacturers don't know where to begin. They don't know what they're eligible for. And so we do have third parties out there that can help with that and help direct them. So, you know, we're very excited about this program. It's a 4-year program. We're about 3 or 4 months into it at this point, and we will be reaching out further. And we're certainly open if, for those of you in this world that kind of know about energy efficiency and trying to pull that together, please come to our website, see what we have to offer, and if we have some gaps that you could help to fill, let us know. We do have an RFQ out there also looking for third parties who can help us to achieve some of our goals. And if you think that's you or someone you know, please reach out to us and respond to the RFQ. With that, I am going to, let's see, let me stop sharing. I'm going to introduce our next panelist, and that's Jacob Hanna. He is CEO of the Coalfield Development Corporation.
Thanks, Tom. Awesome work that you're doing there. I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to have some similar through lines of what was just presented on. Before I jump into that, I am our CEO of Coalfield Development based here in Huntington, West Virginia. And we've been an organization that's been around for about 13 years now. And we focus on a lot of different things, but the through lines are people, planet, and prosperity, and how we can centralize workforce development on a canvas of different sectors that we want to emerge in Appalachia. And so you'll learn a little bit about those sectors here once I get my screen going. All right, does that show up okay for everyone?
That's great.
All right, I need to update some of these slides, but you'll get the gist of it here soon. See if I can advance. So we, as I mentioned earlier, focus a lot on people in coal-impacted places, people in places with dilapidation or lack of economic opportunity. And we train those folks in different sustainable sectors through renewable energy, through agriculture, sustainable agriculture, upcycling dilapidated wood materials into furniture products, revitalizing dilapidated buildings into new hubs for their communities. We have a renewable and sustainable textile manufacturing center in our hub. And we also focus on brownfield remediation. So trying to tackle things that would be liabilities and transform them into assets while engaging the workforce in doing so. And so these are just some of the metrics to date that we've accomplished through this model over our 13 years of being around. I'm not going to spout them all off, but you can sort of read them for yourselves. That, you know, it has a big impact, but it's not going to match the pace of what's needed for the whole state. This is just, you know, probably a 5-county area that this is represented in southern West Virginia. And we really need to tackle broader central Appalachia to make a lot of this change actually happen. And so how do we get to that? How do we take what works well currently in our model and amplify it? And so these are some of our core capabilities. We incubate in employment-based social enterprises to hire those folks in that training workforce. We've incubated the largest solar installation company in the region. It's unionized through the IBEW. They've done their 1,000th installation, have over 100 employees. And so it works really well. And so trying to make sure that after we train people, there are actually jobs for the placement afterwards. And we provide those folks with that personal professional academic development, help them get their higher education degrees that we pay for, help them remove barriers like getting their license back, paying off medical bills, finding affordable housing, helping them have a runway to actually meet the expectation of a workforce opportunity. And then we revitalize places where people live at to make sure that those social enterprises and those people have tangible, meaningful places to live in and to congregate in. And so we are a licensed contractor. And then we use all those tools to point in new directions of markets and sectors that we want to shape. The circular economy is one of them. Renewable energy is another. How do we incubate markets that haven't existed in Appalachia in the past? And so this is going into a little more depth. I can send this slide out to folks who may want to learn more about it, but this is on those 4 core capabilities, kind of the details of it. Again, as I mentioned before, we have social enterprises in renewable energy and light manufacturing. This is the details of our workforce development structure. We have a 6-month version, which is our RAPS program, and a 3-year version, which is our 33, 6, and 3, where our folks get paid on the job training, 6 hours of higher education, and 3 hours of personal development. And so that's been really successful for us, and it ties into our construction. So these are some projects that you see at the bottom. This 3rd one here is our headquarters where I'm at right now. And a lot of these buildings and spaces were designated for dilapidation and demolition. And so how we engage the community is a very ground up process. We host public town halls and charrettes where we invite community members and local organizations and agencies to come in and present their ideas of what should go into these spaces or these grants or these opportunities. And that results in initiatives like this building that you see here. And so how does this lead up to what I'm getting at for like a statewide approach? Looking at these sectors that I mentioned before, these collaborations have naturally developed sort of a regional footprint of collaboration of different partners. And how do we expand on those collaborations and those networks and those partnerships to where today, when you do see this historic amount of funding that's coming, that has been coming underway for the past 2 years, we haven't seen this amount of funding in Appalachia since Lyndon B. Johnson declared the war on poverty in Appalachia. And so what do we do about that? There's not one organization that can pull down all that funding. There's not one organization that has the capacity or bandwidth to tackle all that amount of opportunity. But these communities are specifically designed to receive those opportunities. So what do we do about it? How do we fill that capacity gap? And so that's where we built the Appalachian Climate Technologies Coalition. And so we had built this coalition about a year or 2 ago. It's made up of over 50 different organizations, private and public sector entities, nonprofits, educational centers, businesses, states, cities, et cetera, that cover this county region here that you see, the 21 county region of Southern West Virginia, to focus purely on transitioning for a just transition for the region. These are the different through line sectors that we focus on. Climate resilience, again, what you heard from the previous speaker, a lot of similarities here as well. How can we interweave these through lines and build up a transition for the community and engage folks in these opportunities? And so these are the outcomes that are going to come from this opportunity. It's about almost a $90 million grant that we pulled down through the Economic Development Administration. Again, too big for any one organization to handle or pull down, but too important and relevant to our communities to pass up either. So that's how we were able to build this coalition, to pull it down and break it up into 8 bite-sized chunks. So these are some of the numbers that will come about from this investment. And I'll briefly go over some of the chunks, and I'm happy to talk about them later. Some of the chunks of those 8 buckets is what you heard earlier in our model. Revitalizing communities, about $9 million invested in just revitalizing dilapidated buildings and communities in those counties. Workforce development, training people, but on a multiplied scale in multiple communities outside of our current footprint. So that's about $15 million in that operation. Renewable energy investments, training, getting the workforce ready for renewable energy. We're seeing a massive amount of grants from the Department of Energy right now coming down the pike for huge grants and investments. And how do we get the workforce ready to tackle those opportunities and get employment based in Appalachia? So about $8 million dedicated for that. And then abandoned mine lands. How can we address the legacy of previous energy in our region and transform them into sustainable assets for our communities and just not leave scarred moonscapes across the region of over 800,000 acres that need to be addressed? So this will tackle some of that and also interweave some of them together. So renewable energy plus abandoned mine lands and see how they connect. And then more building-centric hubs. So this is a former factory in Charleston, West Virginia, our capital, that's going to have a bunch of different focuses, some around healthy food access, some around green battery manufacturing and training as well. This is another brownfield site that's in Huntington, West Virginia, that's going to turn into a business zone for clean manufacturing and training and advanced manufacturing in partnership with Marshall University. And then the last two are similar footprints. This is a former building that had trained coal supervisors that is now going to be around distribution, textile upcycling, and circular economies. And then the last one is our Black Diamond factory. Again, another brownfield site, another legacy site. How do we address it and turn it into an asset? And it's going to be a headquarters for Solar Hauler and be a launching point for distribution for solar in the region, and also have a footprint for a circular economy hub, sort of like a Lowe's for upcyclable materials. And so that's the gist of it. I'll save my time for the rest of the Q&A afterwards, but that's how we're sort of addressing that work in the region. And I will stop sharing my screen, and I'll ask for someone to help me know who's next.
Great. Thank you so much, Jacob. I'll pass it now to Jen Gilburg.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for including Pennsylvania's Department of Community and Economic Development, or DCED, in this panel. My name's Jen Gilburg. I joined the department just last September. And my previous experience was working in private sector. And so I worked in manufacturing, I worked in technology for many years, most of it in California. I moved back to PA, where I grew up about five years ago. And one thing that's exciting and why I decided to cross over to public sector was the leadership of our state. So Pennsylvania has not had an economic plan in over 20 years. Prior governors rightfully focused on kind of hot topic items for their tenure. So our last governor, big focus on education. Prior governor was focused on getting us through the Great Recession. So there were reasons why we haven't had a plan, but fact is we haven't had a plan. And so Governor Shapiro, we are announcing a plan. We're weeks away, so I can't show slides on the plan yet. But I can talk high level to the plan and how it will impact this community that's on the line. And the big kind of wins for this community is that manufacturing will be one of the 5 key focus areas, along with energy, ag, technology, and missing one: manufacturing, ag, technology, energy, and I think I'm missing one. I'll think of it later. Sorry. So I think for this community, between the energy and the manufacturing, we'll see some renewed focus and investment. And from my private sector days, when we build a strategy, my big priority is that we're future-proofing our manufacturing. We have the data showing that about 20% of what we manufacture in the state today will contract, if not go away. And staying ahead of that and looking at new applications, not completely new industries, but new applications for some of the technology we have in state, and how we teach manufacturers how to pivot to maybe new applications that will be here in the future. Jacob mentioned a lot about the green technology wave. So power, battery, there's a lot of manufacturing supply chain around the new energy economy. I'm up here at Penn State today attending a semiconductor conference, and what we're talking about isn't bringing Intel into the state. It's really capitalizing on the supply chain that we have already, and how do we expand upon that. Another big tailwind in manufacturing is the reshoring. A lot of manufacturers are needing to increase capacity because we're moving some of the things we bought in China back to the United States. So how do we ready PA to receive some of that reshoring opportunity? And, you know, it used to be that automation was the boogeyman. Automation meant loss of jobs. Today, how I want people to think about automation is that helps you increase capacity. So, you know, I met with a manufacturer here I live in Lidditz, PA, in Lidditz, and they manufacturing nuts and bolts for military planes and tanks. And there are 3 manufacturers like them in the world. One is in China, one's in Maryland, I believe, and one is in PA. And they're shutting down China because the military doesn't want to buy from China anymore. And so this plant is going to have to increase capacity by 40%. They don't have the people to do it. They don't have a way of doing that without automation. So they partnered with a local university and a local community college. The students went through and automated several lines, and now they're able to increase their order flow by 40%, which they wouldn't have been able to do before. So if I leave people with one thing is, you know, embrace automation. It's no longer the boogeyman. It can help you pivot to new products that you can manufacture, can help you increase capacity. So that's one thing I want to leave you with. The other thing is with the governor's new economic plan that again will be coming out in a couple of weeks. We're focusing on, you know, job creation, but underlying to that are things like, you know, statewide broadband. You've already seen us doing work with that, and the objective is to cover the entire state with high-speed broadband access. He announced his GSD tour, which is get stuff done. He doesn't always say stuff. Sometimes he says another S word. With the GSD, we're focused on, you know, workforce participation, and in order to have a higher participating workforce, you need to address things like affordable childcare. So he announced some initiatives around affordable childcare. We currently have a low 60% workforce participation. And as we increase in manufacturing, we will need to have workers reskilled. We will need to bring workers out of different areas where they weren't participating in the workforce. And you'll see programs come out of the budget announcement around those types of things. PA sites, so the site preparation, making sure that we have attractive sites, and that includes redeveloping some of the coal-fired power plants. We've had some successes that I'll talk about later in the panel around coal-fired plants that have been redeveloped. And then we have support of our partners like the Ben Franklin's, the industrial resource centers that can help provide technical assistance to manufacturers throughout the state, either through low-cost loans to improve on equipment, through partnerships with universities to look at those new applications that you should be working on, looking on how we capture more of the clean energy and more of these mega trends around reshoring semiconductor to our state. Fun fact about Pennsylvania, sorry about the others from other Appalachian states, but Pennsylvania is within a 6-hour drive, I believe, of 60% of the US population. And we are within I think it's 7 or 8 hour drive of 50% of the Canadian population. So from a manufacturing perspective, if you go by the old adage, location, 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 we are a great location, and we're underserving and underutilizing that advantage in the state. So again, there's a lot coming to the state with the economic plan. I encourage everyone from Pennsylvania on this call to pay attention to announcements from the governor's office over the next couple weeks where you will see more details on this. But know that my department is really focused on how we grow the economy through manufacturing jobs, future-proofing the manufacturing jobs. So really focusing on new applications for the technologies we already have, how we pivot companies to embrace new applications, use our brain power within the state to help manufacturers future-proof. And you'll see some programs and collaboration with our partners around that. So more on that to come. We missed our timing by about 2 weeks, or I could present the whole plan.
Great, thank you so much. Turning it now over to Jen Seifert.
Hello, everyone. My name's Jen Seifert. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the executive director of the Survivor Advocacy Outreach Program. And I'm really excited to have the opportunity to tell you a little bit about what we're doing in our little corner of Appalachia. And these are the two initiatives that I'm going to discuss today. The New Leaf Justice Enterprises, which is our social enterprise division of the Survivor Advocacy Outreach Program, which is the nonprofit that I'm the executive director of. Then also what New Leaf is kind of transitioned into is what we're calling Appalachia Ahead, which is the Advanced Housing and Energy Acceleration Districts. And this is a techno-social coalition of organizations that are all using health, wealth, and technology as medicine to heal the legacy of extractive economic practices. But where do we start? Well, unfortunately, in our region, it has been typified by trauma. So our organization is an impact organization that's dedicated to the prevention of and healing from sexual violence, domestic violence, human trafficking, and stalking. And the pandemic was really difficult for all of us, but I think most of us living and working in Appalachia realized that these systems really weren't working for the folks in our region. And our organization had this lingering item on our strategic plan to re-envision our prevention programming. And so I dug into the public health literature and was like, what can we do to prevent these types of violence, especially in light of the pandemic that, really accentuated in our region the disparities that we have experienced generationally by way of technology and investment. So when I dug into the literature, essentially one thing just kind of smacked me in the face, and it's this idea of how economic supports are so critical. And so when we're talking about preventing violence, we're talking about preventing it before it ever occurs in the first place. And when we look at what prevents child abuse, sexual violence, intimate partner violence, and adverse childhood experiences, increasing economic supports for women and families is a primary prevention activity for all of that. But also knowing how do we best strengthen the economic support for families in our region when a disproportionate amount of individuals in our service counties are severely rent burdened. We really honed in on housing. And when you look at how housing and income work together, they're kind of the two fulcrum points in the social determinants of health and social determinants of work. And so we were like, all right, we've got to skill people up and we have to address that trauma. So when you look at then this intersection between income and housing, this is an affordable housing continuum, but also has the social and other factors that explain why people might progress or regress on this continuum. And when you look at almost every reason that people progress, right, from maybe social housing to affordable rental housing, or from a market rental to home ownership, again, that lever is income, right? Financial stability. But if you look at the reason that people regress, almost always it's trauma or mental health, right? Domestic violence, the death of a parent or a partner. And so again, kind of accentuating this intimate connection between shelter and individuals, and really kind of elevated this idea of housing and shelter more broadly being the defining social and technical issue of our time. So where we started as our organization was building what we call our resilience villages. So think of these almost like a village within a village or a village within a community. And it's built on this concept of the 15-minute city that's being piloted in a lot of, Oregon and places in Europe, where it's like, what does it look like to reduce our dependence on vehicles and for our population, the transportation challenges, if we build, buy, or borrow all of those supportive services and things that people need to heal to be in order to skill up. So our organization focuses on building these resilience villages where all of these facilities are within a 15-minute walk of one another. So we provide 2 years of free transitional housing, workforce development, financial empowerment, supported employment, counseling and recovery meetings, childcare and youth resilience programming, and also case management and advocacy services. And this talks a little bit about how folks progress in our program. It's a 2-year program where they come in, we move them into our housing. We do a workforce development assessment to identify in-demand living wage careers that they have the interests and aptitudes to be able to pursue, and then work with all of the other workforce development partners that we are privileged to have in our little neck of Appalachia. And this idea of eventually graduating them into permanent housing. And so we started our first recovery village in Nelsonville, Ohio, and that is up and operational. However, then we started grappling as an organization with, well, it's brilliant, these 2 years that people are with us. But what happens if we graduate them into the same situation and the same community, right? Are they going to be able to realize this long-term change if we aren't shaping the environment around them? So then what unfolded was our application to the Appalachian Community Grant Program, which was the state of Ohio designated $500 million of their ARPA funding to the 32 Appalachian counties. And this was the birth of Appalachia Ahead. So we were awarded about a $22.5 million grant to deploy different strategies, again, falling under the auspice of health as medicine, wealth as medicine, and technology as medicine. And so this is a little bit about the different activities that we're going to be undertaking. We're building more recovery villages, but it's really the technology as medicine that I think I'm going to focus on just for the purposes of this discussion. So we worked together with these various community partners to pull together a collaborative group. And this is a model of our circular economy. So if you look at the top of the screen, everything in green, you're seeing that is what my agency really bottom lines on behalf of this group is what I describe as the social pipeline. So we bring survivors and other folks from the community, we bring them into our resilience villages, and then they're skilling up, right? They're engaging in workforce development and other activities. But we also have partners that are spearheading our technical pipeline. They are not with me here today, so I hope no one asks me any questions that require an in-depth knowledge, but it's primarily our partners at the Ohio University Institute of Sustainable Energy and the Environment that are spearheading making construction materials and extracting rare earth minerals from coal and coal waste and recycled plastic and also produced water and geothermal brine. So how this all comes together is we skill up the individuals The folks at ISCE are developing the technology, they're identifying pathways to other local and indigenous building materials. And then that comes together in us building what we're calling advanced housing. So what is advanced housing? Well, essentially, when we think of advanced housing, we're looking at how are we producing that housing? What are the materials that are being utilized? And also, is it responsive to the various climate challenges that we're facing in these extreme weather events? So part of our grant in the next 24 or next 3 years, we're going to be building 24 advanced housing units that are going to be 3D printed with carbon negative concrete and or fly ash enhanced concrete, also using other composite decking, window fenestration, and other items as they're commercialized with our tech partners, and insulated concrete form housing. So both of these are ideal because of their essentially their kind of affordability factors, but also the amount of energy that we have to put into conditioning the home. So this is the impact that we're looking at realizing in our region is advancing the advanced materials, building 3D printers, printing homes, and then also engaging in the workforce development training to be able to skill up our workforce to be able to essentially print these homes. And I describe it as workforce development in process and product often. So while we're teaching individuals how to 3D print the houses, workforce development housing kind of comes out the other side. So that's a piece of those. So the next project that we're working on is what we're calling,
1 more minute, Jen.
we're calling the Thrive Center, which is the Transformational Housing and Rural Infrastructure and Vocational Education Center. And this is where the long-term vision for what we're going to do with our equipment. We have 3 different house printing robots that will be arriving on site. And we're going to be building those first 24 units, but then what are we going to do with that equipment to continue to accelerate this industry and also increase the housing in our region? And this is a conceptual drawing of what that facility will look like. Essentially, it's an industry-driven curriculum that also has circular economy components. And I often describe it almost like a circular economy starter kit. So, you know, if we have the robots, we have the code, we have the material, we can work towards what we describe as import replacement, and the idea of creating some of these infrastructure elements and also housing elements in our region. So I'm just going to go ahead and stop sharing. Woo, that was a lot. Thank y'all.
Awesome. My brain is running like in so many different directions, just so inspiring, so many ways. I just want to move to where you all are and like lend a hand. Like this is just like so inspiring in so many different ways. So I also want to say like all the work you're doing is definitely the work that UMA wants to promote. And so my brain's already kind of spinning and thinking about how can we get your work in front of a national audience, just to like show off what's possible and just like get you more connections and more relationships, etc. So I just want to kind of acknowledge the time. So we're going to try to transition this into a bit of a kind of roundtable discussion. And so in a way, if I kind of take a step back from all the things that I just heard you all introduce and share, so not only did you talk about your amazing work, but I think all the ways in which you talked about it really really helped define like the big picture. It really helped help us understand the complexities of how the world is working and the motivations kind of behind what you're doing. And it's helping really define the context. So I'd like to use this first question and in some ways try to bring it down from the big picture, the 10,000-foot view, down to the ground a bit. And so to do that, we at UMA have found that success stories about individuals and businesses can go a long way in helping people understand how this complex work that we're all talking about really has an impact. You know, if we can find and hear stories about how individuals are benefiting day to day, it really helps people kind of connect the dots. They understand how we need to be working on 6 or 7 different fronts. We need to be talking about housing as much as about construction materials, as much about workforce, as much about childcare, right? So our first question that I want to pose to the group, and some of you have already shared maybe a little bit of a case study, others of you haven't. So if we could just kind of quickly, if some of you can kind of jump in and share with us a success that you've had in your work. And again, maybe kind of use an anecdote of a single family or a single individual or even a small business, and kind of tell us, what success has looked like on the ground, and help us kind of take this big picture, complex context, and help us understand how it's actually impacting the people directly in your communities.
So,
Jen, I see your hand up.
yeah, I'll jump in on one. So, one of the areas of focus from a manufacturing and sites perspective is redeveloping some of the coal-fired power plant sites, and they take a ton of patience. It's so complex. There's so many layers to the onion, and with some of the federal funding that's come in with the Inflation Reduction Act and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, we're seeing some momentum and ability to clean up these sites, get them pad ready. And one success story that we've had in the state is INSA is a medical cannabis growing and processing facility. And they chose its Sunbury Generation site, which is one of the decommissioned coal-fired plants. And they set up their facility, and they started with a small plant. And in 2021, they announced a major expansion. And so sometimes like starting small and growing out is helpful. And that is one case study where, they started relatively small. They were able to take advantage of one of the power already going to the coal-fired plant, the decommissioned plant. They were able to revitalize the area around it. And so that we like to point to is a success story of what normally is a very challenging redevelopment project.
Awesome.
The business it's INCA. I can look and see what that stands for. Someone provided it to me, so I think someone asked in the chat.
Awesome. Jacob, could you share any kind of anecdotes maybe about some people that have made it through your training program, or connect some of how the training program allowed people to maybe...
Totally, yeah. A lot of our folks in the region, you hear announcements like the Nucor energy, the metal plant, steel plant Nucor that's coming into West Virginia. It's the largest private investment of dollars in the state of West Virginia's history. So over 1,000 jobs will be created there. And the stark reality is that more things like that are going to happen. That's awesome. And also, the current local population is not positioned to be able to engage in those opportunities in the condition that their communities and families are in right now. And so for us, our goal is to make sure that a just transition happens. From our definition is that the first fruits of a new economy should first and foremost benefit those left behind by the previous economy. And with that, that's where we have folks coming day one, exiting recovery or exiting incarceration, going through similar to what Jen is focused on in their work, through our stabilization model. They're getting their associate's degree. They've gotten their carpenters training union certification. They've gotten their International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers union certification. And by the end of it, they've earned a degree, and they even become the instructors and crew chiefs to supervise other folks in training and in recovery. So it's a really important model for us to signal that if folks want to come to Appalachia for the cheap land and the funding opportunities, you have to embrace the holistic reality of Appalachia, that there's people here too, and they need opportunity, and we can have our cake and eat it too. It can benefit everyone, and here's a way to do it. And so those, 1,500 people that we trained, they've all been through some shape or form of that model. And what's really cool for us is this isn't just a Coalfield thing anymore. It's a model that we have starter kits through subawards that we fund and start other programs in other companies and businesses and nonprofits for them to integrate and adopt this model to have those wraparound services, because the more you invest in your people, the better retention you have, the better integration and adoption you'll receive from the community. And it's best practices. And how do we do it in a way that's locally minded?
Sure, I can go ahead, Andrew, if that's okay.
Mhm.
So, one of the things that we realized pretty quickly when we were talking with our workforce development partners in the region and integrating that understanding into what's described as the neurobiology of trauma. When we are experiencing active trauma, we have impaired access to our frontal lobe, which is the part of our brain that allows us to learn, to integrate new information. And so if you're familiar with any description of youth that experience trauma and how their learning is impaired, the same physiological response to trauma is happening with adults. And so when we have generational trauma, we have the trauma of being in poverty, and then also the experience of abuse. What happens is we have a situation where folks are incapable, perhaps, of skilling up because of how their brain is functioning in that moment. So our contribution to this work has largely been to create an environment where people can regulate and heal that trauma that they're experiencing to create the environment in which they can learn. And so in our program, all of our folks, have gotten health insurance. 6 of them have bought vehicles. One of them came back from a doctor's appointment and said that her physician was floored because this was the first time in 15 years that her blood pressure and other readings were within typical range. There are physiological effects that people experience, and that's when we think about this work, and it's a hard truth that we're all going to have to reckon with. So we got to dance with the one that brung us, and it's trauma on our people, and it's trauma on the environment that has been facilitated by people. And the only way that we can get people to make better choices is to get them out of survival brain.
Thank you so much. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Tom.
I've got a quick example of a feel-good opportunity that we were able to be a part of recently. Is there's a manufacturer in southwestern Pennsylvania, and they hire a lot of workers with disabilities, visually impaired, and some other areas. And it's very much a family feel. They bring cakes in on a monthly basis to celebrate the employees. And a couple of years ago, well, originally they had one of their products was hangers to hold wiring down in coal mines to keep the wiring, above, out of the way of the workers as they're going through. And a couple of years ago, they altered their product and changed their focus so that they could sell this in the solar industry and to keep all the wiring at the solar farms, keep them up and off the ground and out of the way. And so recently, we've been working with this company off and on when we can and supporting them. But with this latest grant, we're able to help them with things like their quality standards. They have to have high quality standards and certifications to sell to these employers or to these buyers. And so with some of our grant funds and with some on-site expertise that we have, we're able to help keep them up to that same level and keep their employment going and keep all of those workers going. So, it feels really good when you see that kind of, personal side. It's not just helping a business make more profits. It's really helping a community to stay together.
Thank you so much. These are such great stories, such inspiring examples of how we can think about centering community, centering people, and centering the lived experiences of those involved as we try to navigate the complexities, as someone said, of of this transition from, a project-based approach to kind of a transition at a regional scale into a more clean energy and economy. And so we have 2 more questions I'd love to try to squeeze in if we can. And the next one, I really want to kind of ask everyone about the kinds of unlikely or new partnerships that they may need to help them scale strategies. So as we heard during the introductions, preparing the region for this transition into a clean energy economy is going to necessitate partners that work on a range of issues, from housing to supportive social services to workforce training to supporting manufacturers. So I'd love to hear from your perspective, what are some new or unlikely partners that you think will be critical to building an inclusive manufacturing ecosystem? This could be people that you're already working with or new partners that you would really like to see at the table. So I see Jacob's hand is up, so I'll start with you.
Yeah, I love that question. So in our Act Now coalition that I presented on, and the links in the chat too, there's a northern part of the state and the southern part of the state, and they're kind of rivals. You have West Virginia University, largest employer in that region. You have Marshall University, similar down here. They're both in some of the largest cities in our state too. And they're always competing for students, back and forth, who can self-sustain with all the students. And then you have cities as well. So you have the city of Huntington, the city of Charleston. They're always competing for workers and businesses. And so I think what was really nice about our approach is that historically taking those organizations that are very proximal to each other, that have a lot in common but don't always get along, finding the common denominator of this is going to create funding for all of us. This is going to be the tide that raises all of our ships if we can figure out how to present and integrate and deploy a united front to pull down this funding. And so that's where our position was really critical as sort of this neutral nonprofit, sort of the lead cat herder is what we described ourselves as, to really assemble those 50 plus organizations. These were businesses, cities, schools, nonprofits, universities, the whole patchwork quilt. That's what it took to not only represent the need, but represent the capacity to handle these funding opportunities. And so that was really important for us. And now it's launched into this second phase of, okay, now we're working with the state energy office, which we've never really done before. But now we sort of have this collective bandwidth to do so and work with them on things like the Solar for All grant opportunity that's happening, to work with them to provide, how do we complement and fill in some of the capacity gaps that maybe even the state might have to pull down some of these opportunities, and show that it's not just going to be grants to provide jobs, which is great, but jobs that reach all these communities that these partners have a beachhead in, that they have tangible roots in, that they can integrate and intertwine with these funding opportunities. So that has been a really important learning for us. And what's nice is that it has stuck. It's not just, okay, we came together for this one grant, let's go our separate ways. We meet weekly. We've had this grant for 2 years now. We still meet weekly to discuss, okay, what are other funding opportunities we can collectively pursue together? What are other initiatives we can start to intertwine our work with together, and to make sure it stays unified together. So that's what's been important for us, is to learn is how do you integrate all those really awesome organizations that don't always get along, but you find your unifiers and you work together from that.
Yeah, if I could pile on to what Jacob said, it is not just us partnering with the individual partners, it's the partners partnering with each other. And, we had, I think, 5 applications from the state of PA for the tech hubs, and we got 1, but the other tech hub applicants are still coordinating together. Even though they didn't get the funding, they're figuring out, hey, we wrote this proposal, what can we do in absence of the federal funding to push the initiative forward? And then if there is more federal funding down the road, how do we stay focused as a unit to attract that? So for partners on this call, just to double down on what Jacob said, partners partnering together it has really been the nice surprise that I've seen, that when it works, it's like a well-oiled machine. When they're fighting with each other, the people of the region aren't benefiting. So good job on that, Jacob.
I think some of the people on this call might be surprised that manufacturers are working so closely with environmental groups, and even Reimagine Appalachia. Where's the connection? Where you've got groups that are trying to reduce energy consumption, and you've got manufacturers who are one of the biggest consumers of engine energy. And but I think that what we really find is that manufacturing owners, business owners, they realize that they've lived for generations in Appalachia, and they need to keep this. The air that they breathe, the air that is potentially getting polluted is the air they're breathing. So I think there has been a real opening for everyone to say, okay, we need to make things, we need to employ people, we need to have jobs for people, but we also at the same time need to find what's the most sustainable way and environmentally friendly way to move forward. And the reality is, nobody in the world makes things as efficiently as the United States and as Appalachia, and makes them as cleanly, and stays with so I think there's a real opportunity for us to keep working together and achieve our common goals. We're not going to maybe agree on everything, but I think the really important things are what we find ourselves in the biggest agreement with.
Awesome. I just want to say this conversation is amazing, and it's unfortunate that we sort of have 2 minutes left before we transition to the workshop. So luckily, the workshops will give us another hour to be able to kind of build on these conversations and reflect on just reflect on the ideas. And the workshops, I know, are meant to be spaces to continue connecting different dots. And not only is the conversation here compelling, interesting, but the chat, there's like a dozen conversations happening in the chat that are also just as interesting, and hopefully kind of new connections are being made and new opportunities. As Tanu said, we had one last question, and we want to squeak it in, and it's probably the big complex question of the day. So I know it's not fair for all our experts to kind of respond so quickly and so briefly. And then I'll let Dana kind of jump in as needed to transition us to the next part of our day. So just kind of briefly, one of the things that UMA emphasizes is that we need to create regional manufacturing ecosystems that center equity and opportunity and accessibility. And we found that in order to make this possible, we really have to deal with the history of local industries. And for the region that we're talking about, that means coal. And in the prep for this call, Jen Seifert, I think, put it in a really kind of poetic way. She said, "For some, coal is a 4-letter word, and for some, it is core to their identity and family heritage." So with this in mind, again, this is a big question. I know we can't deal with it in 30 seconds, but we'll sort of see what happens. So the question for everybody is, how do we navigate the complexity that comes with sharing an industrial history that is understood and internalized in many different ways, both positively and negatively, and address it in a way that leads to shared understandings that support moving forward? So how do we bridge this gap? How do we accept this history and it's still happening, it's not over, and how do we find a way to kind of bridge these different conversations and move forward? So if everybody could sort of 30 seconds or less. I know this is completely unfair and doesn't honor the complexity of the history at all, but if for sake of time and as a way to sort of transition to the next conversation, so how do we do it? How do we bridge this diverse understanding of what this history means and what continues to unfold today? Does anybody want to venture in first?
I can jump in. For me, it's pretty straightforward. I have 3 generations of coal mining in my family. My father, his father, and his father are all miners. The only reason I'm not is because the mine shut down before I came of age to get employed. So for us, it's truly about honoring the legacy that our communities have provided. We've powered the nation through 2 world wars and built the cities that we love through the Industrial Revolution. And how we bake that into our approach is really in how we communicate. So what you're seeing here is Solar Hollow. That's our social enterprise. It's a coal miner, and our motto is Mine the Sun. And so this is by West Virginians for West Virginians, and it's proudly and boldly displaying that we acknowledge our heritage, and this is what it means to us to move it forward. We believe this is our evolutionary birthright to continue to produce energy. This is another tool in our toolkit to do so. And coal is just sunlight trapped in the soil for 1 billion years. So we're just cutting out the middleman of 1 billion years and going straight to the sun. So for us, it's really just breaking it down and making sure that we're not here to proselytize. We're not here to politicize, but we're just talking about jobs. That is a great unifier and equalizer. And we're proving that these are good union living wage jobs in the region. It may not be as much as the coal economy once produced, and we don't want it to be all the jobs that the coal economy once produced, because that's just creating another mono economy. We want to diversify the economy. And so it's about conversations, it's about education, sitting down, not talking over people, but talking with people about these dialogues, and sitting it down and doing real community engagement and codifying that in community benefit plans and agreements, to where you're saying, I'm not just going to create a solar array that's in your community that it looks good, but does nothing for you. I'm going to make sure the jobs come from here. I'm going to make sure the energy benefits go to your school. I'm going to make sure it saves your bills X amount of dollars, and here's grants to do so. So I'll shut up there. That's 30 seconds.
Yeah, I can hop in. So, for us, it's about finding common ground and also having those really tough conversations about what is possible and the realities of our region and globalization. There are some things that aren't going to come back, and we can have that conversation, but we also have to unify and have that tough conversation about what a realistic and practical path forward can look like. And I also think that a lot of it has to do with a lot of the resistance to progress is because it's the same old about us without us kind of trope. And I think if we're including the community from the very beginning, we can find that those highly politicized conversations, when we're doing it one-on-one and we're focusing on solutions that are practical given the economic realities of our region, can be a lot more productive.
Mm-hmm.
Jen or Tom, do you have any last thoughts before we transition to the next part?
They captured everything I was going to say. So just listening to those impacted. I think Jen had, what was your saying? It was, you had a good buzz line there, but
nothing about us without us.
There you go. That's a great, I love
phrase.
that. I'm going to write it down. And because we tend, Pennsylvania is flipped on its side from West Virginia. So we're east-west, and we have 2 anchor cities with a little bit in the central part, but then we have this very diverse center of the state, and we can't make policies for the anchors and expect them to work throughout the state. So just making sure we're listening to those communities.
I would just say that I think that, we're at a great time where a lot of the opportunities are also aligning with the sustainable goals. So it works out very well that, we're helping companies to achieve that and, work together. So I don't see a lot of either or. If anything, I see some manufacturers are kind of saying, right now we're all the above, but as the opportunities go in these environmentally friendly directions, that's also where the manufacturers are going. So I think it's been a great chance for us to make everybody happy in that same way.
Everyone, Andrew, yeah.
No, excuse me. I just want to say thank you all for those kind of reflections and observations, and I think it's amazing how many different sort of similarities there are across your work and similarities across the most, I think, successful initiatives we see across the country at UMA. So again, thank you all for sharing your insights. Everybody in the chat, thanks for those conversations. And again, Reimagine Appalachia, thank you so much for inviting UMA to be part of this conversation. So I think at this point, we'll hand it back to Dana for the next part.
All right. Thank you, Tanu, Andrew, Tom, Jacob, Jen G, and Jen S for your incredible insights and for that fantastic conversation. Thank you for everybody who participated in the chat. I'm so sorry for folks who raised your hand that we weren't able to get to your feedback, but please share that in the chat. Or get a hold of us. The conversation does not end today, but it does end for the moment. As Molly, I think, said in the chat, but just to say it out loud, we will record the breakout sessions that will start. We did record this conversation that just concluded, and we will share that recording as well as PowerPoints to anyone who is registered for the conference, and they're already available on Facebook Live, this session. We're about to move into breakout sessions. We do have those will start at 12:30.
Hi, everyone. So we just have a quick kind of chill debrief here at the end of the day. So I'm going to share my screen. I have another Mentimeter, which I know we all love. And so I'm going to get some feedback from all of you. And then hopefully after those, I think I have 3 questions, we'll kind of go into an open conversation debrief. We're going to hear from Amanda, her thoughts about today, and then kind of open it up. So let me share my screen real quick. Oh, I'm going to need sharing. I don't know why I no longer can. I had no problem before.
Just a minute, we're working on it.
Thank you. I don't know. Zoom is so weird and strange. But so I think we've scheduled 20 minutes for this. Is that right, Amanda?
15, but I'm sure you can take an extra minute. And then if you have the link to the Mentimeter, folks can start filling that out while we work on getting you screen sharing capabilities. If you want to drop that in the chat.
There's that. And I'll move on to the next slide. So the question is, what did you hear today that excited you? So that's from your breakouts, that's from the beginning of the event, anything in particular, be as broad or specific as you'd like.
And if you can't get the link to work, you can put your answer in the chat and I will input it into the poll. And are Annie and Lou, can we get Lou? Are you able to screen share yet, Lou?
Not yet.
All right. I'm not sure what to do. So I'm not, it's above my skill set.
It's way above.
Here we go. Try it now. Sorry about that.
Yep. Thank you.
Great.
That looked like, okay.
There it is. Now you can see the questions. What did you hear today that excited you? I'll hand it back to you, Lou.
Thanks. And I'm glad we're already getting some stuff in here, and they're very different. And a lot of them are exciting me. So like after we put our answers in here, we will be having a conversation. So I encourage all of you to elaborate on these in a few minutes when we open it up. And these are going to be helpful and useful aids for future documents and things like that. They're just a pretty representation of what we all heard today. So I'm going to give it another 30 seconds and then move on to the next question.
And for folks, yeah, can you blow that up a little?
I don't think
Is that about it?
yeah.
I was going to share as well for folks that have been interested in all these different word clouds we've had going today. We will share the screenshot of all these and follow up because it's hard to read them as all these cool responses keep coming in.
They also look so cool.
Yeah.
This definitely won't be the last you've seen of them. I'm excited to put them in our manufacturing action plan.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next one. So which breakout session would you prioritize first? So I've been talking about low-hanging fruit and things like that. What would be your first go-to for us to start tackling? Now I know you all didn't go to each of the breakouts, but just based off of the titles. This is a new one that I'm using that I really like. New slide. Seems a lot like a lot of people are focused on manufacturing jobs and equity. Means Reimagine has a lot of work ahead of them.
Well, we're a coalition, so we don't do anything without everybody else doing it with us.
Everyone's raising their hand right now.
We got a lot of cat herding to do.
Yeah, for folks who aren't aware, we have a very small staff. We punch way above our weight class, so we don't do anything without the organizations that make up the group.
All right, we seem to be slowing down, so I'll give it another few seconds and let people input their thoughts, and then we'll move on to the next one.
You have a other question in the next slide, or should maybe people could put that in the chat if there was something that wasn't on here and they don't see it on tomorrow, something. Yeah.
That would be great.
Yeah, what's missing?
Absolutely, yeah.
There's also a section in the survey that's kind of extra thoughts or things like that. So I would encourage to put it in there as well, because that'll be tracked. All right, I'm going to move on to the next question here. So what type of manufacturing work needs to be done in 2024? And I have 4 questions, I realized. So this is, do we need to work on regulation? Do we need to work on building cooperatives? Do we need to work on innovation and infrastructure? Whatever you can think of, put it in.
And if you put your answer in the chat, I can drop it in for you.
Seeing a lot of this Craigslist for circular manufacturing, which I like to see. Lots of collaboration, cooperatives. Make sure to come tomorrow to tomorrow's session as well. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff on cooperatives tomorrow. Cooperatives again, upskilling, drawing businesses into the Reimagine network, working on that. Unions, infrastructure, renewable technologies. Awesome. So I'm going to give it another 30 seconds. So make sure to get your thoughts down, and then we'll move on to the next one, which is a follow-up to this question. Unions, training. Awesome. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next one. So what is your role in them? You know, we all have different jobs. Some of us may not be in a job that directly works on manufacturing or circular economies or cooperatives or anything like that. So what is all of our roles as individuals, as organizations, companies, to help make those manufacturing strides in 2024? So far, very different answers, which is good. Cooperatives. Wow, these are awesome. Very interesting. Great. I'm gonna be closing it down here in a few seconds and then opening up to discussion. I like that my name got thrown in there. Thank you guys. I'm going to put that, but appreciate that. I love when my hand gets raised for me. Great. Okay, I'm going to close this down so we can start having a discussion. I'm going to stop sharing, but the next slide is survey. So make sure you do this survey. We'll have some time at the end for you to do. But now, Amanda, I want to hear your thoughts about what happened today briefly, and then we'll bring it out to the audience.
I thought this was an amazing day, like just really good thoughts and contributions, and very active conversation in my breakout session. I definitely heard some actionable items particularly from the keynote panel. I heard some projects we should write up as models for folks to think about replicating or expanding in their own communities. I also heard the idea of some sort of matchmaking for the circular economy. Like, how do we connect manufacturers with waste to, companies that need that for raw material? What's the role for entrepreneurship in making those connections? Maybe there's a role for co-op as well to help solve some of the barriers to entering these markets. I heard somebody sort of mention the need to really dig into maybe interviewing or surveying manufacturers or potential entrepreneurs on what are the barriers to entering these sites and coming up with creative solutions. Lots of interest in having companies develop zero waste plans or something along those lines, and figuring out some policy ways to promote that. So yep, I definitely heard some great ideas and things we can put in that manufacturing action plan, but love to hear what others heard or think should also be in that plan.
Thanks, Amanda. Anyone else have any thoughts? Feel free to just throw it out there right now.
I thought it was an amazing potpourri of all kinds of things. And there wasn't necessarily any pattern to it, but it was just wonderful the way it all came together. That's my 2 cents.
This is Steve. I mean, I guess what I'll say is, we've been working on manufacturing now increasingly really in the last year, 18 months, but for several years in Reimagine Appalachia. And I think the conversation today really, I guess, fueled my ambitions. And the whole point of this conversation was to get to a manufacturing plan. But I think we have to be bold about that. And there are enormous challenges in terms of job quality and manufacturing. Unionizing manufacturing is a lot harder than like raising union density in construction. But I feel like a lot of the conversations we've had in the last 18 months to 3 years and the conversation today are we're kind of edging towards a team and a level of understanding that will allow us to articulate a bold plan. And I mean, we really do depend in part on the energy of labor in this sector, as a partner. And yeah, one of the big changes in the last 6 months is the successful UAW strike in the auto company. A lot of that being driven by the desire for or commitment to getting union rights in the EV industry, and to making it possible for the UAW to organize that. So again, I think we're after an extended collective thinking process. I think we're on the verge now of actually being able to operationalize some really powerful next steps.
I like what you said there. You said fueled ambitions. I think we have a lot of takeaways and a lot of work to do. And I know I feel very invigorated to do that work. And I hope we all feel the same way. Does anyone else have anything they want to add? We have a few more minutes left. Love to hear the feedback.
Yeah, I would just like to say we have to see where there's a closer coupling between energy and manufacturing. No manufacturing is going to take place without energy. And that's where we got these coal-fired plants that already exist. They need to be a place where manufacturing takes place. Like I said before, we just don't want to go from megawatts to megawatts. We want to go from megawatts to mega products to be able to diversify our income, and also to create non-exportable jobs and bring manufacturing back to the United States that's been missing, that we have to have critical to our national security and to our economic security.
Thank you.
I love that. Megawatts to mega projects. And I have to use that.
So I'm just going to end it off here. I thank you all for coming. Amanda, I'll let you speak too, but I want to highlight that there is a tomorrow. We do have more tomorrow, so make sure to clear your calendars for the day, and hopefully we'll see you there. Amanda, I'll let you. I don't know if anyone else has any final words.
I think that might be Dana. Or Dana, do you think that might be me?
I'm happy for it to be me for the sake of time. Thank you all so much for joining us. We'll be back here, same bat time, same bat channel tomorrow, 11 a.m. For a fantastic webinar. Again, as noted, everyone will receive a copy of the recording as well as a copy of the presentations given. We do not share the registration list because it is nearly 500 people, and it's a lot of personal information to be sharing 500 people, 500 ways. Trina, so I apologize for that, but we are happy to get you in touch with, any, if you were in a particular breakout room, we can probably help with specific requests that you might have as far as networking. The agenda will be different tomorrow, Bryn. We can maybe drop the link to tomorrow's agenda in the chat, but we're going to be focusing on a broad range of issues, thinking about how we tell the story of our successes in Reimagine, and what we want to build for the region, and
Yeah,
the agenda is in the chat. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'll add, it is less manufacturing focused, although we will have a session on co-ops and the new energy economy that was originally scheduled for today, but that'll be tomorrow. I think one of the things that came up today that we'll be digging more into tomorrow is also this idea of community benefit plans and community benefit agreements. We'll be having a roundtable discussion about what do we want in those things, union jobs, diversity, apprenticeship, utilization requirements, that sort of thing. We're also have a program around reimagining your community that Natalia means. I don't see her, but promoting visioning at the more localized level. I don't know if you want to say something about that, Natalia.
No, okay. Yes, we will be having Commissioner Shireen Hess from Indiana County, PA, a rural county, who will be talking about some of the work that they're doing and some of the challenges, but we'll be using that as a launch pad for a broader conversation of how communities are working within the framework of the federal infrastructure package on a grassroots kind of ground up level. And this, again, as Amanda and Dana have said, it's going to be a broader conversation. It's not necessarily focused on manufacturing, but it's focused on what communities want, whether that's EV charging stations or solar farms or, you know, other community assets. So that should be an interesting session.
We also have a comms workshop for how to better tell our stories. So if you're comms people in your group, that'd be a good one for them to go to.
Great. So we're gonna close out for the day. I think our staff can stay on for another minute or two if anybody has any pressing questions about tomorrow. I appreciate everyone so much. We always say the greatest asset you all have is your time and your wisdom, and you shared both with us today. So we could not be more grateful at Reimagine. So with that, I will let you all go. And like I said, so this meeting